Wow, this is so much fun. This is one of my favorite things and topics to talk about with other endodontic practices. And I hope your holidays are looking ready to explode into fun times with family and friends. And this time of year is always just a great time. I'd always find myself kind of getting reflective during this time of year because we're winding up the year with a practice, and we're looking forward to 2024. And I just kind of felt that this was a perfect time to have a get together where we share some things that I think can make an immediate difference in your practice, so that you can make some changes. Change is exciting, and I'm even making some changes in my practice between now and the beginning of the year, just because if our minds are open. I think that's one of the things that I remember when I opened my practice. You go to residency and you get trained so well, and you basically wind up being in this box. And unless you kind of know what's possible, or if somebody kind of pushes you and says, "Hey, have you thought about maybe doing it this way?" We just really kind of stay in a box. And I kind of found, as I just kept getting a little bit older, and life is in a box and practice is in a box, and where did these walls come from? And basically I kind of realized that we are self-limited by sometimes our experiences, sometimes the types of training that we get, sometimes just what life does to us. We literally put ourselves in a box, and my box kind of kept getting smaller and smaller, and I kind of started feeling claustrophobic in my practice. And that's when I decided, hey, I need a coach. I need to work with mentors that help me expand what's possible, expand my brain, expand, how I was looking at the world, because these boxes are just glasses that we look through that we think is so important. And when it really comes down to it, the box can be as big as you would like. And I like to think about my practice as kind of a sandbox. I can invite people in to play along. If someone's not playing nice, they have to leave the sandbox. But there's so much freedom in what we do, and I think there's never been a better time that is now than to be an endodontist. And so the things we're going to talk about are things I've learned through the years, the things that I actually do every day in my practice that work. And I think that's the value, because we just don't know what we don't know. And that box, we want to just keep getting bigger. We want to keep expanding our lives. We want to expand our practices. With the technology at our fingertips now, root canal treatment has become such a predictable procedure that patients used to be so fearful of. And we used to think that we had to do all of these things. And really, it's been such a great time of expansion in endodontics. I'm so happy that I chose the specialty, not maybe so much for the very first few years that I practiced, but just where my practice is now and where I'm at personally. And I love being an endodontist, and I certainly want to share my passion with that. But one of the things that we want to talk about is abundance. So having an open mind to what's possible, and to free some of these ideas that maybe you're tied in the old world of doing root canals. We want to keep our minds open. One of my mentors said, your mind's like a parachute. It's best used when it's open. And that has been so true for me in my practice. And so I think that's one of the things that we want to just keep expanding, is we want to open our minds. But what we want to start doing here today is to just lay some groundwork for some things that you can immediately analyze your practice and make some changes that will make a significant difference in the way you're doing things, and probably most likely your bottom line. But abundance comes in many different forms. We have abundance of time, we have abundance of energy, and of course, money is also considered abundance. And at different points of our careers, I think, early on, money was one of the most important driving forces. I mean, that's a stored energy. Money is a great resource, and certainly we love the abundance of what we do, coupled with that. But many endodontic practices that Chrissy and I work with, it's this tiredness at the end of a day, this like, I'm exhausted, I can't think about going into the office again tomorrow. I'm just so drained, I have to go home and disappear. I don't want to talk to anybody because I don't want to talk to anybody for about an hour. And that just tells us that there's some things going on in the practice that maybe just need some little shifts, some changes. And I always like to kind of, uh, offices that we work with, one of the first steps we do is, rather than a to-do list, we want people to start a stop doing list. Because many times the things that we do, and I think about myself when I started practice, I mean, I looked at it, I had to tell the patient what their diagnosis was in scientific terms. I had to, tell them all these things about what the procedure would entail, and then get them numb, and then do the treatment, and then at the end, I had to talk to them to make sure they had all the information. And yeah, we were exhausted at the end of a day. And one of these things that we want to really start looking at is what are we doing that we can train our staff to do for us. And so I would like you guys to do this too tomorrow. If you're going to be in the office, have a little piece of paper and put on the top, stop doing list. And if you catch yourself doing something that'd be like, man, why am I doing this? Jump outside of your body and look in, and kind of go, why am I doing the preoperative instructions? Why am I doing the postoperative instructions? Why am I doing treatment reports? Why am I writing up, all these things? Many endodontists that we work with, they're in the practice treating patients, and then they have a couple hours of charting that they have to do, and they have to email dentists and all of these things. And we want it to be a very freeing experience to go through this process, where you start to enjoy the process of being an endodontist, and not all these other things that we can train our team to do. So the number one, very first thing that is so important to a great run practice is clinical efficiency. And I don't know why efficiency has kind of gotten a name that, or a meaning that endodontic practices are afraid of, or endodontists. They think that efficiency means you're moving fast, you're skipping steps, most likely, maybe not being thorough, maybe not being, like you were in your residency where it's 2 visit and you treat it with calcium hydroxide for, years, and then finally decide to complete the case. Uh, you know, Clinical efficiency, I think, is one of the biggest threats to our specialty. With the technology now, with GentleWave, with lasers, and we work with offices that have all of this technology. All of this has just made it more predictable for us to be efficient. And I'll talk more specifically about my specific techniques that I use, but this is not about rushing. This is not about skipping steps. This is not just about completing more cases. This is trusting the technology that we're using so that you can complete more cases with confidence, less stress, and that patients benefit. So this is about kind of trusting what we have at our fingertips so that we can provide more excellent care and treat more people. When I first opened my practice, I was an endodontist that could do 5 to 6 cases a day, and I thought the day was full. Go home at the end of a day, and I had no idea that there was a possibility to maybe make some shifts in the practice, have my staff do a lot more things for me, hire the right people, so that I had more time to actually focus on patient care. And well, unless I kind of was aware of that, I would have never even thought that that was possible. And so one of the things that we love doing with offices is getting into this idea of how many cases is the practice doing, and how long are you in the office. And I think one of the interesting things is, most endodontists would say that they take an hour to do a root canal. But then when we look at the data from offices, like how many cases does an office typically complete in a day, and we see this 4 to 5 number. That's kind of the average magic number that's out there, which is the average number of cases. And Yet, if an endodontist says that it takes about an hour to do a root canal, what's happening with all this extra time? And that extra time is all spent on things that we can get our team empowered to do for us. So one of the first steps in getting clinically efficient is to really understand how long it takes for things to occur. So when we were working with an office, we have from the moment a patient walks through the front door, how long does it take a patient to fill out paperwork if it's not already filled out? How long does it take for the assistant to take the patient back, greet the patient, make them feel at ease, you know, welcome in the practice, you know, a sign of confidence, to take the CBCT, the periapical film, get the patient seated, verify the you know, the procedure, verify the symptoms, so the patient really feels taken care of. We have to know this time, because many times what offices do is they put, well, the patient's going to be in the practice for an hour and a half, so that's how long the root canal needs to be on the schedule. And what we find is that when we really get systems in place, when we really start to dial in what's happening and what's going on with the patient, we can seriously open up much more time in your schedule that allows you to actually be the doctor and complete, you know, 1 to 2 more cases without too much effort. And again, with this stop doing list, we want to create another list for you to time these actual things that are going on in your practice. How long does your assistant take to do that? Then how long does it take when you get updated by the dental assistant to go in, verify the diagnosis, and then provide local anesthesia? And we see a wide range of that. You know, many times practices have a financial consult that needs to occur after the doctor has talked for about 25 minutes with the patient. And it's soon about 45 minutes, and we have done nothing to get the patient started on treatment. And so we'll talk a little bit about how that is. But, you know, we also have endodontists that get to that point where it's about 5 minutes. Patient doesn't have any questions. They know the diagnosis. They know why they're there. They know the fees that are going to be charged today. And that's what we want to get to. We want all of these things out of the way. And there's a system for all of that, so that when the doctor is ready to go into that treatment at 8 o'clock, all of these things are all taken care of and we can begin getting at. But until we know how long that takes in your practice with you, we really can't develop a great schedule. So you can time yourself on all of those things. And I'll just tell you a little bit about how we do things, you know, because we are very efficient and very into systems and things like that. You know, my office is able to schedule anywhere from 13 to 15 cases a day. Now, that's not rushing. We have adequate staff, so they're not overworked. And part of this timing is that we want to understand where we're dipping out the extra time. You know, time we can't get back. And, you know, as we age, I'm getting older. I think I have blonde hair, but there's some gray in there. Time is very important. And I value my patients' time as well. And when I said earlier that I think efficiency is one of the biggest threats to our specialty, you know, everything is getting more efficient. Cars, computers, our iPhones, iWatches, just about every technological thing out there is going through efficiency and getting better and better as time goes on. And yet there's this hesitancy for endodontists to want to get more efficient, you know, to start really relying and trusting the technology so that you know, we can provide more treatment and get more patients taken care of. So for us to be able to do that, and we'll talk about how my team does that, but really clinical efficiency, it's not more difficult to get, you know, 3 or 4 more cases into your day without too much more effort, but we have to have some systems in place. So in my office, when I'm the last person to get to the office in the morning, and, you know, my team has that first patient all ready to go. They're back with the CBCT. And so on our schedule, and that time that's on the schedule is my time with the patient. It's not that the assistant time. Also, if their finances hadn't been discussed on the phone, that could be easily, a half hour or close to that. And then the doctor time. So what's on the schedule needs to be just the doctor time from the time the doctor walks into the room until the procedure is completed. And unless we know that time, we really can't devise an efficient schedule based on your timing. So when I walk into the room, the patient has already been kind of talked to with the dental assistant, and the assistant has answered all their questions about the procedure, what to expect, all the things that might come up before a patient, uh, you know, meets me. They might start on laughing gas. That's one of the things we train our assistants to be able to do. So if you're in your state, that's allowable. That is a great way to start the patient feeling relaxed right away. So that when I walk into the room, I already know the entire story, right? How many times have you been to a doctor's office and you tell the front desk the why you're coming in, and then that information didn't get to the nurse that's going to take you back, and you tell the nurse the whole story, and then the doctor comes in and the doctor didn't talk to the nurse, and so now you're telling the story 3 and 4 times, and that's terribly inefficient. So we have a form that kind of travels with the patient, and we'll talk about a screening sheet when we're talking about scheduling, that all of the information the assistant can review that was given to them at the front with the referral slips. And so the assistant is just verifying the things. Oh, I heard your tooth was extremely cold sensitive. Is that still the case? Heard it's been keeping you awake at night. And I know your dentist gave you an antibiotic, and whatever the story is that when I walk into the room, I don't have to ask any clarifying questions. I'm literally just saying, hi, I'm Rick, and I heard about your tooth, and I heard all about you too, which they always laugh because they think that there's some bad stories that get told about them. And what that does for the patient, it makes the patient feel at ease, because we're showing that we know them. We're showing that we've spent time to know their story, to understand exactly who they are. And from the moment I walk into the room and shake the patient's hand, then wash my hands and put gloves on, and the patient gets reclined, before we give anesthesia, it's about a 3 or 4 minute process. And the last question I always ask, which is a great one to ask so you can see how your systems are going in your practice, is, Mary, do you have any questions for me before we get started today? And I always keep track of that, because if they say, yeah, what are you going to do today? How many times have you got that? Oh, you're going to do it today? Well, how much is this going to cost? Is this going to hurt? All these questions that can be like a total uh, confusing and chaotic feeling when I just want to just have that patient taken care of. And I would say 98 to 99% of the time, the patient says, no, I don't have any questions. And I know my team has done a great job. So again, one of those things to keep track of is when you are at that point just before anesthesia, ask the patient if they have any questions before you get started. And if they say no, you've got a great team and you're ready to go. But it's a nice indicator of what systems might need to be refined. Part of that clinical efficiency for me is that I train my staff to do everything that I don't have to do, meaning I don't talk about the procedure. I don't talk about the technology we use. I train my team to talk about those things, so that I'm kind of an introvert. So at the end of a day, I kind of like to leave the office with just about as much energy as I came to the office. I'm ready to go do something else, but this tired, exhausted feeling usually can lead you to burnout and not wanting to see patients anymore. And so I think it's a really good indicator to just make sure that we're training our team to do everything for us. So after I give anesthesia and I leave the room, that's when they typically would have a consult for me that's all ready to go. So again, the dental assistant's waiting right outside the door and says the story about that patient, or maybe it's a well check that we booked alongside that, so that I can skip over and meet that patient, or figure out what's going on with that patient, make a diagnosis. So that's key. So the assistant that's with the patient we just got numb, I typically will do a cold test or percussion test if we need to. But most of the time, it's usually one test that we typically rely on unless it's difficult to really get at what the chief complaint is. But the assistant will then use that same test in about 3 or 4 minutes to make sure that the patient's numb, so that when I come in, I don't have to say, "Oh, how's that feeling? Are you ready to get started?" And then I have to put the dam on. The assistant knows that I'm going to be in a consult for 10 minutes or so, and they'll test the tooth, put the rubber dam on, and that so that when I come into the room, it is go time. There's no having to talk to the patient and all this. Now, if the patient is not numb, let's say a hot lower tooth, cold sensitive, they know that I use intraosseous anesthesia, and that's another thing that I would highly recommend that you become extremely comfortable with. All the studies from Ohio State, Al Reeder just studied that in so many different ways, that if you're not using intraosseous anesthesia, I would highly recommend it, because it literally gets that patient completely anesthetized on those difficult hot teeth that we just don't want to have to do intrapulpals. And the studies speak for themselves. I think when they did a cold test, the patient had lip and tongue sign, cold test, and 56% were completely anesthetized. And that's almost 50%. I mean, that's not very good. In a given day of 8 patients or 10 patients, you're going to be doing intrapulpals on half of those patients if you have a day full of 19 or 30. And what happens with intraosseous anesthesia, that number goes up to 96%. So if I'm a patient in your practice and I have an irreversible pulpitis on tooth number 30, I'm going to ask you, please do intraosseous anesthesia. You don't have to wait around. There's no, it's the best thing ever. And I want patients to be completely comfortable in my chair, because most of them carry a little bit of anxiety about that at the same time as wanting the treatment done too. So that's very good. So, by the time we do that and get into the procedure, we access and literally find the canals, and then the clinical efficiency with what we use in my practice. And I use GentleWave. I've tried all the technology, and GentleWave has allowed us to take our efficiency to a whole new level, because when you train your team to take care and take control and empower them to just do all these things, that moment of the 8 minutes of the cycle allows you to leave the room. The assistant talks to the patient as they're holding the PI. And it just is a real eye-opening experience for the patient to be connected to this technology. And that's when I typically transition. Another thing about clinical efficiency is transitions. So many times in schedules that we look at, we have offices that look at, I start and finish a case, then there's a time to have a coffee break, then I start and finish another case, and then I start and finish another case. And there's a lot of lost time with that. Every transition, and what I mean by transition is there's a point in that procedure that allows you to get up and go start the next case, make the diagnosis while something's occurring in the first room. And that, for me, that's the GentleWave that's being done. A check film with gutta percha in place is certainly another good transition period. So we don't have patients in every operatory. We're just using a magical moment during the procedure where we can transition over to start the next case or to do a consult. And so this is not about chaos. This is about literally just staying in the flow. I'm not concerned about what time it is in the course of my day. I just am in the flow, and I know that it's time to, when I get up, I know that something's going to be ready for me to go do. And that's kind of the fun part about being in the flow. The day just kind of takes care of itself. So then once I start that next case, I come back in, and then we dry the canals, put the gutta percha and sealer in, and melt it off. And my clinical technique now, with minimal instrumentation, which is another great concept of the technology that's out there, is that it allows, 1 to 2 files is really all that we need to do. And my assistant measures working length off of the CBCT. And so I always laugh about telling this story because I see the shock on people's faces, but it's a beautiful process is that I haven't used a Root ZX in probably 2 years. And, to have accurate measurements from a CBCT, because we're staying short of that area in the apical region anyway. And we just don't, whether it's 18 or 18.5, it's not that big a deal. And I think one of the nice things about this technology is that we're not having to have patency files. We're not taking a 10 file with attached to a Root ZX and sticking it out the tip of the root, which I think really keeps the bad stuff inside of the tooth and then out. And I think whenever we put a 10 or a 15 file to make sure that we're have an open patency, we're taking stuff and we're pushing it out periapically to create a flare up and some discomfort. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's been documented that there's less post-operative pain. But just my ideas, because I see it working. But then after the filling, my assistants take care of temporizing the teeth. If I do a permanent filling, of course, I do that and adjust the occlusion, make sure everything's smooth. And by the time I get to that next operatory, the dam's on and we're ready to go. Unless, of course, I'm going to do intraosseous anesthesia, then they know that I'm going to be in to do that. And that just really worked. That's the day right there. And that's why when offices are doing 4 to 5 cases a day, there's so many little opportunities to be able to get to, maybe 6 or 7 cases a day. And let me tell you, a practice doing 4 to 5 cases a day, getting to 6 to 7 cases a day, working the same amount of time, probably less energy being poured out. You times that by the time of days that you work, times the weeks, the months, that makes a significant impact on your practice and yourself. So clinical efficiency is one of the biggest areas that I feel endodontists can make some growth, because I realized that that kind of was where I was at too. And trusting the technology that you've chosen is great. So the second aspect, now that we know our clinical timings, we've have a list of things we're going to stop doing. We've got systems in place so that the patient doesn't have any questions prior to treatment. Now we need to devise a schedule. And how do we do that? Well, if we don't know how much long time it takes for a doctor to do a root canal, it makes it very difficult. So that's one of the most important aspects, to have a template. And we wanted the same template every day. So we have a production column and we have a non-production column. And we don't, even though we have 5 chairs, we don't have 5 columns. That's crazy and hectic. We know that a tooth 14 needs to be in a 45-minute slot or a half-hour slot or an hour and 15, whatever that time slot is, so that the scheduling team has a template that they just know exactly where to put patients. They know where to put emergencies. They know where to put well checks or evals and where not to put them. And, we work with practices that have a different schedule every day. And it's very confusing for the back office. It's very confusing for the doctor, because every patient we have, well, is this a consult and start, or is this just a standalone eval? So we want to just make it easy on everybody so that when we look at a schedule, we know this is all treatments in the left column and all what we kind of joke and say time wasters in the right column. And I just jokingly say that, but when we look at the production of what we want to do in a given day, that column does kind of get in the way. And we're working with an office right now that, does 4 cases a day, but they've have 8 or 9 consults in the right column. So that balance is a little bit off. We want 8 or 9 treatments and maybe 3 consults. That would be ideal, because now we're really focusing in on what we're good at, and that's treating patients. The training the team to be able to really have a good idea whether it's a treatment or not is one of the skills that I think as endodontists we really need to focus in and make sure that they know what endodontic disease is and what are the symptoms throughout the cycle of what happens to a tooth. I want my scheduling team to understand toothaches better than the general dentists that send us patients. And why do I do that? Not so they can make a diagnosis. We're not having them do that, but they're getting this sense and feel for that sounds like a treatment based on my experience. And so they can help guide that patient into a treatment slot and take care of those things. So having a really good screening sheet, meaning regardless of who answers the phone at the front, there is a step-by-step process that the questions get asked. First, there's a nice flow of, Mrs. Jones, tell me about your tooth, what's going on. There's compassion, there's verifying. And we always like to say, hey, we would like 2 signs or symptoms with our scheduling team. And that's enough to say, hey, that sounds like that tooth might need a root canal, Mrs. Smith. Let's get that scheduled. On the same flip, we also look out for those things that could get in the way of treatment. Someone who's extremely anxious that hasn't been, numbed up in years, or maybe they had a bad experience. And so part of your screening sheet has to look into all of these potential things that could get in the way of you providing treatment. And we're continually monitoring that. Every once in a while, life will throw a crazy curveball at us. Like, oh, we forget to ask about that. And so we'll, hey, add that to the screening sheet. And we want to make sure that front desk person builds a rapport with that patient, that they listen and they catch things that they know is very important. And the patients really love that conversation, because if we don't have enough people at the front, what happens is someone's leaving the practice or someone's coming in and, oh, Mrs. Jones just telling you about her toothache, and now you got to put her on hold because you have all this chaos going on. And we want to have enough people at the front that allows us to be on that phone with that patient, so we don't have to put them on hold and then come back and then put them on hold again. And that feeling, we want this to be a really great, excellent customer service, and having enough people to do that is great. One of the things very important is to look at how far you're booked out. If you were to look at my practice, you would see us booked out 1 to 2 days. Because we like to work with the top offices that do no root canals. And if I'm booked out 4 to 6 weeks and we have no way of getting patients in, guess what? My practice is not growing. I feel good because I can say, well, I got root canals for 4 to 6 weeks out there. That feels really good. But you are going to lose if a new endodontist comes into town and sets up a practice right next door. Guess what? They want their patients seen that day. Or the next day. And so efficiency matters, right? So if I'm not an efficient endodontist and it takes me all day to do 4 or 5 cases, and the top referring office who sends me 18 cases a month, I can't get their patients in for 4 to 6 weeks, efficiency matters. And so that's part of that process. We have to be able to where do we put emergencies? So getting efficient actually opens up availability for you to get more emergencies in. So most offices that we work with, I use an average, someone that's completing 4 to 5 cases a day. By just going through this process of looking at things, they're able to, many of them up to 6 to 7. And we have one client that is able to do 8 or 9. And that's doubling the practice with just no extra time, but just getting systems in place, things that can make a big difference in your bottom line. And let me tell you, you double your practice, that's significant. And that's abundance. So anyway, look for ways to not be booked out 4 to 6 weeks. And that's one of the best ways. I was just at a local restaurant here in Bellingham, Washington. And we love this restaurant. It's a great place for happy hour, appetizers, and dinner. And we've been there twice. And if you don't get there at the right time and get seated at like 4:45 or 5 o'clock, The reception team just loves to tell you, oh, well, it's going to be 60 minutes to an hour and a half before we can seat you. Well, guess what? You're not going to stand around for an hour when you want to go eat, right? And so one time we did sneak in and we heard the receptionist, the hostess was telling people that the bar was packed, right? That's where everybody kind of wants to sit. Sun's going down. You see the sunset. It's beautiful. But guess what? At about 6:15, 6:30, people are kind of wrapping up, either moving on to another spot for dinner or whatever. The place was empty at like 6:30. So here they just told everybody it was going to be an hour and a half. And by that moment, it was, they needed those people, right? And that's just verbal skills. That's just like maybe not having a great trained team in the back. Let's keep people kind of moving through here, and telling people maybe 30 minutes rather than, an hour and a half. Maybe somebody would wait for 20 to 30 minutes. But there's so many different ways to look at this. You want, to be full and not be telling people it's going to be 4 to 6 weeks, because you're either going to have a lot of no-shows or they're going to get in to see somebody else. So we do not want to be booked out more than a couple of days with that. And I like that analogy of the restaurant, because this restaurant is losing a whole seating in their entire restaurant because they just don't have the right skills to get people in. Some offices have this need to have a consult first and then reappoint the patient. And we really want to empower our scheduling team to be able to get those patients in and figure out what's happening and get them absolutely scheduled, and get that feeling and vibe of like, that sounds like a treatment. We don't need to do a consult on everybody. Because you think about it from the patient's perspective, they've had to tell this story now 5-6 times. They had to call their general dentist, tell them 2/3. Then the general dentist has to see the patient. And again, the assistant sees the patient, has to tell the story to the assistant, then the doctor. And the doctor says, yeah, I'm going to refer you to an endodontist. And here's the number. They call the endodontist. They go through the story all again. And then same story, patient comes in. Oh yeah, we just have to see everything. And then, oh yeah, you need a root canal. Well, the patient's in pain. And that's not single visit endo. Single visit endo is working with your referring offices that you can take the information that they have given you, coupled with what the patient gave you, and put that patient in a treatment slot. There's no reason to do standalone consults on every treatment that you do. And unless the diagnosis is difficult, there's not enough symptoms, the dentist didn't tell the patient anything. And we don't really like to work with those offices that don't treat their patients in that way, that thoroughness of, oh yeah, I said there was a dark spot up in the bone over the tips of the roots. Oh, okay, there we go. There's one, right? But we want to get that patient in and get them taken care of. Patients want single visit endo, and they don't want to come in for a consult and then have to be 2 weeks later. And it's also easier on your scheduling team when they can empower them to take care of that schedule for you. Very, very important. So scheduling is all in my office. Every day looks the same. I mean, some days we have, maybe it's 9, 10, 11 cases, but we have that capacity and the training and the systems that if the phone's ringing off the hook, and many times it does, that we have spaces to put those patients. And let me tell you, top referring dentists really love that. When they know, and one of those verbal skills that really for your front desk to tell patients is to say, we save time in our schedule every day for Dr. Johnson's patients. So the patient's like, whoa, they can see me today. And guess what that patient says to that general dentist when they go back? They said that they save time in their schedule every day for your patients. You guys must work closely with them. Now, those kind of things make a big, big difference. And so I love it when offices, we can target these practices that the dentist has said, I hate doing root canals. we want to cater, we want to put the red carpet out, we want to do whatever it takes. And let me tell you, you don't want to tell a dentist that could send 15 to 18 cases a month that it's going to be 4 to 6 weeks before you can see their patient. You want to get them in today or tomorrow morning, whatever that is. So lots go on with scheduling, and we review that with our scheduling team probably every 2 months. And I know this is possible because we do this, and two of my front desk people had no prior dental experience whatsoever. So it does take training, it does take systems, it does take the ability to really dive in and spend the time. But there's payoffs for that. Training your assistants, all of those things always pay off uh, after they get empowered to run the schedule. So we've got clinical efficiency, key. We've got scheduling for production. I think that's one of the important things that takes such precedence and so much payoff when we get our teams empowered. The last thing is kind of my favorite, and it's one thing that Chrissy is extremely great at, and it's that teamwork. Sometimes we have front desk teams that fight with the back office, and the back office fights with the front, and there's this tug and pull, and we don't have time for an emergency. Yes, you do. No, we don't. And there's resistance and all these things. And before Chrissy kind of shares her experience in working with offices, we want to have offices that have our team members that have a can-do attitude. We want people that when you say, hey, I'd love to create some space in my schedule for maybe 1 or 2 more emergencies every day. Whoa, that's impossible. I mean, that's a difficult employee, right? And we just can't have that in my practice. We want people to say, hey, that sounds exciting. Let's see how we can make that happen. The answer always has to be, let's see if we can make that happen. And maybe there's some people in your practices that are the resistors that kind of dig their heels in whenever an idea comes up. And those people will not last in my practice just because I'm unstoppable when I want to try something. And I like people that smile and say, let's give it a go. And I think that's important. And we want to empower this team to run the practice. Even now in this time of year, I spend a little time out of the office. When I go back in, I'm always really aware of where I'm spilling out energy or doing things that I shouldn't be doing, or somebody that maybe I didn't train well enough that could have taken that off my plate. Such an important process. And being vulnerable to say, yeah, I probably could train my assistants to be a little more, take care of this for me. And front desk team as well. Because really my job description is pretty simple. Get to the office, change into scrubs, and then do root canals or retreatments or whatever is on the schedule. And then to get out of the way and let my team wrap up the day and take care of all those things. So an empowered team is the absolute thing. The other fun little game, and then I'm going to turn some time over here to Chrissy. Stop answering questions. Empowering your team means that and I know it's tough because we like to always have the answer. We always want to be, the authority. I love it when I hear an endodontist get asked a question and I hear the endodontist say, I don't know. What do you think? What do you think would be a good solution or a good way to take care of that? Because the employees 90% of the time already know the answer. They're just wanting to, one, either get your approval or to let you know that they've thought about this. And then we typically give the wrong answer that they want to run with. And so when we empower them, they run with it. And if it doesn't work, great, but at least they owned it, right? And that's what we want in every position in our practice is each employee owning what they do. And that is another just fabulous way to quickly empower your team. is to just put it back on them. What would you do? And that, I think, has been one of the biggest things that I was a control freak. And so to get rid of that feels great for me. It's less energy. I don't have to solve every problem that comes up. And I have, 7 or 8 people that can say, yeah, this is what I would do. I'd say, that's a great idea. Let's do that. Because then now they own it and they're going to see it through rather than me telling them what to do. Okay, Chrissy, love for you to share some of the insights that you've gained from your vast experience in working with offices, and that would be cool.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay. Well, let's see here. Let's go ahead and pin me. All right. There we go. Well, I like to tell people how I started out. When I was a dental assistant, this was a very, very, very long time ago. I mean, my youngest child is 30 now. So I started out, I did not grow up with a traditional family. I lived in many different homes and I never learned emotional intelligence. I never learned how to work with people, how to be in relationships with coworkers. So I was the difficult one to work with, but I was so skilled and such a fast learner that the doctor she saw the potential. And the reason why I became a life coach is because I was confused. I walked around the world just confused my whole life. I didn't understand why, if I saw something and they saw something, why are our stories different? And why am I getting in trouble for this and she's not getting in trouble? I mean, I was just always in trouble at work. So we got an office manager in who started to work with me and to teach me about these things. And when I started to gain clarity on perception and how everyone's different and how we're all treated differently, and she taught me about teamwork. And I'm telling you, we had the best team that I've ever worked with in a dental office. And that is why I absolutely love, 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 love working with teams as a whole and teaching them how to have that bonding experience, because then you want to do things for each other. You don't feel like you have to. There's no drama. I mean, every once in a while there's drama, but not hardly at all. And when I'm working with teams, I work with them one-on-one. I have several meetings with anybody who needs it. And it's just really nice to be able to teach them what's happening, why this is happening, how to make it better, and let them come up with their answers on their own, because we all have the right answers inside of us. Sometimes we just need it pulled out of us. We just need the right questions. And working with teamwork, doing building team building exercises with each other. I mean, that just creates a really strong atmosphere. So mindset is really important. Trust is really important. The fact that the doctor I worked for trusted me in everything that I was doing, that really made me want to do more. Because when you can't learn and you can't grow in an environment where somebody's micromanaging. So empowering your team is, I mean, as a team member myself, I grew not just in the office, but as a person. I was a single mom at the time. And the fact that I was able to learn all these things helped me in my personal life. And that's why I love doing what I do. When I'm working one-on-one and I'm coaching the office managers, the front office staff, and it's not just about coaching on verbiage over the phone or, what to say to a patient or, how to do a transition. It's talking to them about skills just in general. And they're able to take that into their personal lives and they grow as people, not just as employees. So I really enjoy that. That is what I see as just is so important in an office, is to have that support system. Uh, Rick had made a comment earlier. He had this quote, I think that was by one of his mentors, and he said, "The mind is like a parachute. It's best used when opened." And that took me back because when I was a dental assistant, I was an avid skydiver. I owned my own parachute. I mean, I have well over 300 jumps under my belt. And the thing that I've learned in my self-development journey is that, yes, we take jumps, we take chances and we want to jump and we want our parachute to open. And the one thing I've learned is you can't do it by yourself. So when you take a jump and that parachute, maybe there's an issue, that reserve parachute is your support system. That support system helps you, it helps you to analyze and to adjust, and it gets you down on the ground so that you can do another jump again. And so I think that having the support system along the way is absolutely crucial to being successful in everything in life, especially your career. So, yeah, that's that is my experience. And if does anyone have any, do we want to open this up to a Q&A now? Rick, did you have anything else you wanted to talk about before we wrap everything up?
Yeah, no, I just appreciate you guys being here. And, a lot of people are going to see the recording of this. So any question that you guys decide to ask, I'm sure would benefit those who will be watching this later. And really, I love questions. I think the more the better. You might have some questions related to the clinical efficiency side of things. Sometimes it's about, well, how many staff members do you need to have to start expanding this as well? And that's one of the things that we just love doing, working with offices is we're side by side and literally, whatever your goals are, we get you there. And sometimes people not sure what their goals are, and we assist with that as well. But yeah, any questions, unmute yourself, and just love to hear how things are going in your practice and what issues you've run into this year as you're reflecting on your practice. And if there aren't any, that's fine too. We love awkward silence.
Hi, Rick and Chrissy. Thank you for your time today. So Kate is the practice owner and I help kind of on the back end. And I'm curious to know what is your staff makeup? How many dental assistants do you have in front office staff?
Yeah, great question. And that's one of those questions that is a great uh, for other people as well, because sometimes when they hear that many cases, it's like, well, what does that take, an army? No. So most offices that are doing 4 to 5 cases a day and controlling that right side, 2 assistants is great. I think really practices need to have 2 front desk people regardless. We want to provide service and make sure that patients are getting taken care of. And if you're on the phone, you don't have to put people on hold and all those things. So an office that then gets to 6 or 7 cases is that moment of then 3 assistants. And as that number gets closer to 9 to 10, we think about having a 4th dental assistant, because one of the things that I think is important. So in my practice, I have 3 front desk people and uh, 4 dental assistants plus. Oh, I love it. There was a question there. I heard it.
Yeah, we need to answer that question.
Yeah. What that allows is that for a typical day, let's say on average it's 12 cases a day, and I have 4 dental assistants. They each would have 3 treatments, so that gives them time to do charting, do the treatment reports, to not be rushed with that patient, right? So at the end, I mean, there's many times that I'm almost done with my transition time, and the assistant is still talking with that patient about post-operative uh, questions the patient might have, or maybe the patient's just so blown away by how efficient the procedure was. But that's kind of the guide for what we do. I don't want my assistants, you'll burn out assistants and front desk people when they want to get something done and they just don't have the time, or they keep getting distracted. And my goal is to have my dental assistants not have to do so much that at the end of the day they're exhausted, and they also get things done as that day is going on. Sterilization, maybe patients call with a post-operative question, and the front says, hey, let's get the lead dental assistant to talk to you about your tooth, and puts them on hold. And then there's an assistant that has time to talk to that patient. And that's incredible. So we want to have enough people. And I think when people start to move into this area, we want to be maybe a little bit overstaffed, because it does take some time to kind of build these systems. And we want it to be, just a, a Zen zone. And I love telling the story. We had a business person who runs a company called Sonendo, and he was the engineer that devised it, and he wanted to come to the practice. And he's not a dentist, not an endodontist, but extremely intelligent. And he was just like so blown away. He said, I thought there was going to be patients in the waiting room, patients in each dental chair, and this chaos and people yelling and screaming about all these things. He goes, what's happening? I mean, it's very quiet in the practice, because when everybody knows their role, there's really no need to be chirping and telling and all these things. We have nonverbal symbols and signs, sometimes hand motions. No, I mean, sometimes. And just there's a system for everything. And we have the gift as endodontists to only be doing 1, 2, or 3 different procedures. And to get the systems in place to just make that so effortless, I think, is the fun part. And if we were general dentists, we'd have, a lot more chaos going on, and a lot more systems to have, and a lot more team members on the practice. So does that answer your question? I think based on the number of cases, I think it's good to kind of gauge that.
I also, sorry, go ahead.
It does, and kind of is similar to that is, does everybody roll up to you, or do you have somebody kind of leading the team? And then the second part of that is, who is actually managing the workflow? If you are kind of just going, to the next room, who's actually kind of in charge of the schedule?
Yeah. So we like to have, and there's different terms for this person: team leader, office manager, which the term office manager kind of invokes some negative connotations. But yes, there is a team leader, or a front person that oversees all of the systems that are happening in the practice. And that's who I interact with the most. Now, if it's little things, and again, if there's an issue with something that wasn't clear at the end of the day, we'll say, hey, man, today was so great. Thanks for helping with that nervous patient. Wow, you were so great with this patient and all that. And then, what didn't go so great today? So little things like that on a daily basis. If there are things like pop up, I like to have that kind of interaction. And then, okay, what can we do to keep that from happening tomorrow or the next day? But as far as the systems, my office manager, team leader, is the person who makes sure that, because they see that patient walk in, they see the assistant take the patient, they hear the sound in the operatory, they know where I'm at, they know who the next patient is and what time. They're like the air traffic controller. And so we want someone who's seen everything to be in charge of that. So I mean, I make very few decisions on a daily basis. Nobody comes to me to ask any questions. And if they do, I say, I don't know. Let me, you probably know, or say, talk to Travis. He'll probably be the best person to talk to about that. And then I quickly run to Travis and tell him what way it should be. No, I don't do that. But yeah, Chrissy, you were going to say something.
Oh, I was just going to say, that's another thing I feel is really imperative when you have systems for the staff to know what's expected of them, then they know what to do. And so we really have to get clear on what it is that you want, how you want it to be run. All of the systems come from, what your desire is. Once everybody is in alignment with that and they know exactly what to do, it's the same system over and over. So it becomes practice makes perfect, and it's repetitive. It's also a great measurement tool, because when the office manager finds that something is off in a specific place, we can compare it to the system. We can find out, and it's great. Mistakes are great. I mean, they're not, people are so afraid of failure. But when we're able to live with failure in a different way and we're able to see it as this is a really great opportunity to find the root cause of what's happening and to grow and get better. And when your staff feels that way, they're not scared and freaking out because they've accidentally made a mistake. You get to make a system better than it was. So it's a really great measurement tool as well. So, and when things are running smoothly, efficiently with the systems, that allows you to have a specific number of staff for each thing. And, I thought it was great. Working in the front, just the systems and the way we answered the phones and the triages, it was great. I knew exactly what to do every time. And, every once in a while we would go to the doctor with a question, but usually that was, with an x-ray, and it was asymptomatic. And that was also 30 years ago. So
Same process now, right?
pretty much, yeah.
There's one of those situations where the screening sheet reveals nothing the dentist said other than please eval. And they send a bite wing. Thank you. We like to really, one of the little tips and tricks is to do a scan day where the patient just comes in for imaging, and then the doctor reviews it without having to take time to do an standalone eval. And the assistants are trained to do a little triage, just like a triage nurse would do in an ER, trying to help focus the ideas to where this is maybe coming from. But we want our teams to be doing as many things as possible. And in my practice, I would rather hire one more dental assistant to get something off of my plate that I really don't want to do. I have a philosophy that we want people doing things in the practice that they want to do. And the more variety and the more people you have allows you the more ability to give those things off of your to-do list, stop doing list, right? And that's always fun to do, have a stop doing list.
And that's a part of an abundant mindset. When you're doing things and you have this energy behind it that you're like, oh, I'm doing this because I have to, and I don't really want to be doing this. It doesn't help. It doesn't bring anything in that's going to relieve that pressure. When you're giving it out and you're empowering other people, you become happier, your energy becomes happier, and everything starts to work out. So it's just a part of an abundant mindset. And that's something to be learned as well.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, are you using like routing slips, or it sounds like there's a lot of paperwork?
No. Paperwork. So we have a very simple screening sheet that is literally just kind of like an idea or a feeling concept behind, if there is a specific question, and these can all be different based on, I used to have to always felt like I needed to do a consult on apico patients or retreatments. For some reason, I thought this is more complex. Patient needs to come in. We need to talk about all these things. And I've letting all that go because we really want to just get patients in and if they have questions, we have people to answer those. And then, the doctor verifies everything. But there's not a lot of paperwork. But there has to be a system in place for those questions and the things that are important. And then that it's literally about this size. It's very simple, very straightforward. And the people that are on the phone, just making a little note, cold, pressure, chewing, up at night. I mean, right there, that's covers so much information. And then there's a little medical and dental history. There's an anxiety kind of questionnaire. Have you had a root canal in the past? How did it go? Was it by a general dentist? Was it by a specialist? And they're looking for things like, oh my God, nobody's ever been able to get me numb. If they haven't had a root canal before, we always ask, well, how is it, when you get a filling, how's it been getting numb before? You know, all these questions kind of lead you into that. Is this patient going to be okay sitting in our chair, getting a root canal? And if any of there's hesitancy on that, we're not pushing people into those treatment slots, right? We say, hey, maybe it's best if you just meet the doctor and we kind of make sure everybody's on the same page. That happens, right? And that's fine, because then I know that patient wants to meet me, wants to feel comfortable, and then we'll do that. And that's totally fine. We just don't want to have 10 of those a day or 8. We want to have maybe 1 of those or 2 at the most. And when we really refine this process of going through this, it really opens up a lot of possibilities with getting patients in and not having to spend so much consult time. But yeah, I'm anti-paperwork. You know, we very streamlined. That goes with the front desk team, then it goes with the assistant. The assistant just uses it to look at before that patient comes back, like what's going on, so that they don't have to ask all these questions again. They're just verifying what the front desk found. And then they share that with me. And then when they walk the patient out, that goes back to the front because they write in there, you know, occlusal filling, root canal number 14, gentle wave, or standard, whatever. And so then that closes the loop with that. And, you know, really that gets kind of shredded because the important information gets written in the chart. And that's what the assistants will use, you know, patient reports, history of cold sensitivity, spontaneous pain, blah, 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 blah. And then what we did. And then, you know, that can be shredded. That's not a legal document. That's just an office system. And those systems just make it so much easier to know. And then whoever the scheduler is, they put their initials. So if there's somebody that maybe could use a little bit more empowerment, you know, we can say, hey, you know, let's talk about this patient. That could have been a treatment. What led you to think about that being a consult first without doing a treatment? And so it's a great educational tool to use. And so when we have like 7 or 8, you know, things that either were a treatment that then became just a consult, or vice versa, that's when I sit down with my front desk team and say, all right, here, we got 7 or 8 of these. Let's go through them and see what we could have maybe done a little differently to really put that patient in the right spot. And but you know, it's the best effort. We want at least 90% accuracy or somewhere along that line. And my team, like I said, 2 people have never had any exposure in the dental office at all. And you know, they're lead schedulers and putting patients in and having those conversations. It's just so much fun to watch, you know, just they've getting excited about endodontics. And like 2 years ago, one of them a year ago didn't even really know what endodontics was, or, you know, all these things. So it's kind of fun to watch them get empowered.
All right. Well, thank you. I think that we need to put some kids to bed. It's really nice to listen to you both today.
Cool. Well, it's great to meet you.
Yes, thank you so much for joining. If you want to schedule a clarity call, I put the link in the chat. You can open up another browser. I'll also add it to the email I sent out with your link to the recording afterwards. So if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And we'll let you know about future events. Thank you so much for spending your time this evening with us.